Hi, it's Monday, it's 3 o'clock. Welcome to Together Unlocked, brought to you by Together 2012 from East London and the West Midlands. I'm Ju Gosling, artist and artistic director of Together 2012. With me today in the Ju 90 studio in Canning Town is
Julie Newman, chair of Together.
and artist in her own right. We'll do a little bit of audio description in London in a minute, but let's go over to the other half of our virtual sofa first for some introductions and some audio description.
Yeah, hi, I am Robin Surgeonator. I'm the business director at Together 2012. I am also an artist in my own right under the name of Angry Fish and co host of Together Unlocked up here in the West Midlands. And today, and if I lean over, you can just see. So I have lovely, long, hippified silver grey hair. I'm getting younger at the moment. Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. And smaller. uh, I'm wearing no rimmed silver armed glasses, sporting a bit of a 4-day shadow, I think, and going with the
Four
hippie.
days.
Sorry,
4 days.
yeah, it might be 3. Anyway, um, and yeah, I'm old enough that my beard grows rapidly. And I'm also I am wearing certainly what those viewers can see is a mid blue hooded sweatshirt, and it's got a logo on the left breast which says 2019 swimming. Oh God, National Para Swimming Championships. Believe it or not, viewers, we went through this not 5 minutes ago. And Activity Alliance, which is the disability sports organisation that were running the event.
And I believe you actually designed the t shirt.
Oh, I did. Yeah, that's my great logo work there.
I'm Josh Surgeonator. I'm a PhD research student and a host of Together TV and occasional sweatshirt reader. I have pulled back blonde hair into a kind of ponytail, which, whilst it may be the fashion for Hollywood actors, it's purely because it keeps going on my nose and it's really itchy because I haven't had a haircut since about February. And I just couldn't see anymore. So it was a functional thing more than anything else. And I'm wearing a black t-shirt that has a gold star and a gold silhouette of Alexander Hamilton because it is a t-shirt from Hamilton the musical.
So, back in London, I have very short, headed red hair, having felt just as frustrated as Josh. I had a very itchy neck, but I took the assistant's dog's shears to mine. I have actually got a pair of human clippers decontaminating now in the quarantine. But Julie still reckons that she won't let me use them. I also have black framed glasses. My hands are in black and grey splints. I've got silver jewellery and I have a white t shirt with a sort of stylized computerized logo with a planet that says, "We can change the world."
Which is, of course, the Together logo, isn't it?
Together we are strong. Together we can
We can
change our
change our
world.
world. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. I've got silver and gold hair. I have dark rimmed glasses. I'm wearing a white t shirt which looks as if it's had a paint pot or several paint pots tipped over my head, as in there's splashes that come down over the shoulders of different colour paints. It does look like that, actually. It really does.
And it goes very well with our background, which is the famous Together 2012 graffiti banner, which has got pictures all over it of the different activities that we run: film, drama, photography, dance, theatre, carnival arts, drawing and painting, and much, much more, including most recently a webcasting. Oh, great. The virtual sofa has just moved back up the page. They were slipping down their sofa and we were seeing the top of their screen. Also, in the background is our teddy bear Matilda sporting her gold medal
The
because
medal.
London won last week's Paralympics when we
Yeah,
Great
it did.
clockwork
Yes, they
toys.
did. So they did.
That was the week before.
Yes. Sorry. Getting
I'm afraid
confused.
the Surgeoners are the most competitive family in the world, so they take great exception when our clockwork toy wins, which is about 1 in every 4 goes, which actually doesn't
Mm.
seem quite right to us. But we have a bunch of new competitors, the WD-40 not helping our sprinters very much, and I believe this week we will be racing clockwork cockerels. That
Cool.
is, if they move at all. We'll have to see if they just jump up and down. We are doing this partly to celebrate the virtual worldwide bear hunt. So you can see different bears on our screens every week. If you're celebrating the bear hunt, we'd just like to say again, congratulations to Michael Rosen. We're
Yeah.
so thrilled you're out of hospital. Get well soon.
He's working hard. He's got on his Twitter feed. He's talking about his sticky McStick stick and how much it's helping him to get some sort of muscle tone back in his legs. But he's working hard.
We've all got those sticky McStick sticks, and as somebody has already pointed out on social media, that is one way of working out social distancing. If you can hit someone with your crutch, they're too close. But as we're really more focused on staying indoors, staying creative, and staying well, before we move on to our Join In From Home program, let's just talk about what happened at the weekend. On a Friday, we have a spot called Something for the Weekend, and we were talking about virtual global pride. We were talking about Glastonbury, and it's almost the end of June. We've been celebrating Gypsy, Roma, and Traveller History Month, Pride Month, and last but by no means least, Newham Heritage Month. Julie, how did you get on with virtual Glastonbury?
Oh my goodness, my eyes are propped up by matchsticks, which you can't actually see at the moment. But my goodness, another weekend of virtual wonderfulness, lovely festivals. I very much enjoyed the Global Pride 2020, and I felt more included in Pride this year than I have done for a very, very long time, bizarrely. I thought it was wonderful to be able to watch Pride happening globally, and it was programmed beautifully so that it came from the world, from starting off in New Zealand and Bali, and then traveling across as the sun would move, and finishing in Hawaii. It was 26 hours, very full on, and that was fantastic. And there's YouTube uh, sort of little films of bits of it, so you can actually check out individual performances and things like the individual pride contributions. I was really impressed to read that 400 people, I think, in Taiwan actually did an actual march for all of us who couldn't, and I just thought that was amazing. They took a flag and they marched through the streets, and they did it on our behalf. I think as well, in Spain, in one of the cities in Spain, they took the freedom flag down from the city hall. So the next thing they knew, there were freedom flags flying throughout the city, which was absolutely wonderful. And it's a lovely way of resisting. Their motto this year was exist, persist, and resist, which I thought was very, very good. Glastonbury was
Can I
exceptional.
just come in
Sorry,
on,
yes.
as we've moved straight on from Glastonbury to Pride? I'll just come on here on Pride and let you get back to Glastonbury. One thing that it does explain is Judy was saying to me before the show started her ME was bad, but I think she's actually got the same post Glastonbury Monday syndrome that people have in real life. Yeah, I switched on Global Pride on my phone about 9:30 on Saturday morning, and immediately there was a piece on about a beautician, a trans beautician from Thailand, I think it was, who was born with part of her leg missing, and it was her story of using a crutch. They didn't. There was no kind of attempt to not discuss disability, but it was very much about her beautician's business, how she'd set her business up, how she also works as a volunteer to train deaf beauticians, and it was accompanied throughout the streams by live BSL and live captions. And there was no question that you had to turn the captions on and you had to know how to do that, because it was just streamed as we stream our recordings, with the captions automatically there. I mean, they must have done an incredible job. And considering that the palantypists, like our own wonderful Julia, will be working from home, the interpreters were working from home. Yeah, I absolutely felt the same. I thought it was the first time for many years that I'd felt included in Pride. It was the first time I'd ever genuinely felt part of an international movement. And I just really, really hope that they continue to do it. Of course, the ideal is to have live streams from different prides around the world taking place on the same day. But there's always going to be, like everything, so many more people who can't go. And of course, what's also happened at Pride in London is a lot, it's become ticketed, and then a lot of the tickets are saved for people who aren't gay at all, but are supposed to be allies, and then they pay to take part. And it seemed to have moved very much away from the spirit of Pride. And I think this Pride had very much that spirit of Pride. You could tell it was the UK Pride Organisers Network representing the UK and not just London. I might just leave it at that. But the other thing I just wanted to flag up that was really fun, Regard retweeted them, I'll try and put a link in, is a group called Kenrick, which is a LGBT type women's group, did a wonderful series of Lego scenes. So through the day, they were releasing these Lego pictures of their Lego Kenrick people doing their Lego Pride parade. And as the global Pride went on, they would release more pictures of how far the Lego had got. And I thought that was just absolutely fabulous. I know you can do stop motion animation with Lego people very easily, and I was quite inspired to see what we could do with Lego. Unfortunately, Julie has a massive collection of Lego, but it's all over at her house, which is not quite reachable yet. And when we've discussed the weekend, I think I'm not the only one feeling really confused about the government guidance. So I do just want to review that for a minute. But Julie, Glastonbury.
Oh, I loved it. I I was very selective about what I watched, particularly because Saturday clashed with the Global Pride, so I used the iPlayer, the BBC iPlayer. But I loved Beyonce. I just was so blown away by her energy and her professionalism. I've loved Beyonce since she was with Destiny's Child. And I loved Destiny's Child at the time because they were all so young and sang wonderfully. They were fantastic. Their performances were exceptional. And she obviously, and Kelly Rowlands as well, went on and developed a career of her own. But the one performance that completely blew me away was David Bowie last night. And I couldn't switch it off. It finished very late. But I couldn't turn it off, and I was struck afresh at how lucky I am to have grown up in the 50s and 60s and then coming into 2020 and watching how popular music has progressed, to be able to remember the very first film that my mum and dad took me to in the drive-in movie was Rock Around the Clock. So I was around at the beginning of rock and roll. I was around when we had the start of Motown, Atlantic Soul, all of those. And, I just feel so privileged to have been able to be part of that and to be part of that whole peripherally, obviously, because I was working and doing those sort of things that you do when you're younger. But sort of like to be able to follow the music, to engage with the music, to love the music, to go to concerts, and see live performances was a real treat for me. And looking back on it, sort of Glastonbury, the shows of past Glastonburys, which are up on the BBC iPlayer site, I'm going to go back to and just look at some of them. It reminded me again, I didn't like Oasis, though. That was the only thing.
Yes, unfortunately, although I do have a collection of Access All Areas production passes from the early and mid 90s, it was very much around the guitar band stages, which, of course, We love singer songwriters. We love single people playing the guitar on their own. Don't get me wrong, Robin. But there's
Yeah.
just so I've been privileged to see, or I was privileged to see, in the 20th century, so many guitar bands so close up, and I don't think I appreciated any of them. But there you go. So, how was your virtual weekend, guys?
Have we got any time left?
I
Um. Well, actually, I mean, on guitar bands, I think a lot of music is about where you were when it came out, what part of where you were in your life at the time, and so for me, for example, um, there's Oasis I don't like, but there's other Oasis which is absolutely anthemic, and you know every single word of. Oasis fans is another story. I think there is a big, there are. I think if you split the band between the brothers, you can split the fans the same way of the acceptable and the unacceptable. Let's put
So,
it that way.
before we wander off too far
Yeah,
from
yeah. I'll,
disability arts and what we did at the weekend,
yeah.
how was your virtual activities?
So I certainly did an amount of Glastonbury. I probably watched actually not for the first time as a repeat the Cure set from last year. Um, I just totally infatuated with the Cure. Love everything that they do, the moody stuff, the upbeat stuff, the kind of irreverent pop stuff, and and another act that I really like, and I think from a pride point for a lot of people who won't really know who she is, but there's a singer called Janelle Monet, Julia. That's JaneLleMonae with an acute accent, I think. Um, and she was a bit of a Prince protege, and she's absolutely fantastic. Um,
Can you tell me, Judy, are these sets still on iPlayer? Because I didn't know even see the Cures thing. I mean, well, I was doing Global Pride, and we'll come on to it. But yesterday I was doing Heritage Month. But the Cure set sounds unmissable. What
yeah,
about you, Josh?
I mean, kind of similar, really. We had it on one device or another most of the weekend. If we weren't watching it, we had the radio on, and kind of listening to it, and then listening to kind of request shows. I know Six Music did a lot of stuff. Um, was kind of people sending in their individual highlights from throughout the years, and then kind of playing those tracks. So it was interesting to. It meant you got a kind of much broader experience because you had kind of every taste covered. I mean, Six kind of
yeah,
does that anyway. You can get some great stuff, and every now and again, it's normally when there's somebody that hasn't listened to it before, you put it on, you think, what on earth is this? So they really do kind of run the gamut normally. But it was quite interesting to things that we maybe wouldn't have watched or wouldn't have listened to, then being able to kind of hear it was quite cool.
Excellent. And did you, because as regulars will know, you flag up a lot of gaming and virtual sport for us on a Wednesday. Did you have any good games, or was it more of a watching weekend?
oh, don't.
We finished the co-op game that we started a few weeks ago, called A Way Out, that we mentioned.
Perhaps we should leave it till
And
Wednesday.
yeah, we'll leave it for Wednesday. But we'll just say that he wasn't very happy with me.
Somebody loses, don't they? That's the trouble with these games. Somebody
Yeah.
has to lose.
We'll tease that for Wednesday.
Could I just say about the Gypsy Roma and Traveller History Month? A friend pointed me towards a BBC Scotland series of films by a disabled traveller activist called Davy Donaldson. I've sent the links through, but he's absolutely lovely. He writes so beautifully. He should have finished university. He should have graduated this year. He should have been getting ready for his marriage. He should have been getting ready to travel with his family because this is the time of year they would be on the road. But instead, he's been shielding. And I really, really strongly recommend for an insight, certainly into Scottish travellers, and to get a sense of how the calendar year moves for travellers. I think this is a really lovely series of films.
So, can you, I mean, just to flag up again for anyone who's new, we have a highlights and links page. It's just below the Together Unlocked TV link on our website, www.together2012.org.uk. And all of the things we mention here today will have the links. Also, any videos that we show will be embedded in that stream so that you can see them again. Julie, can you tell me a bit more about these films?
Well, basically, they're his story. For example, I've got a quick glance at uh, the BBC Scotland's called The Social, and he's got 100 days shielding as a Scottish traveller, and it's basically it's a little blog, um, and it's really giving an absolutely clear insight. There's also a families, friends, and travellers history website, and they've got a film which I've completely forgotten the name of. I've got a link for it. It's a YouTube film. Let me just tell you the name. It's Crystal's Vardo. So that's Crystal's Vardo, and I've sent the link to Julia, so she'll have it. And it's a young person's film. It's there's sort of short introductions to it, but the proper film itself, all of those are on YouTube, and I really strongly recommend it. It comes from the Friends, Families, and Travellers History website, but it's a beautiful film. It's beautifully made, and again, it's about young people.
And I think it's been so important to look at Gypsy Roma and Traveller Month this year, in particular because I think it's been one of those silent epidemics. Nobody really knows how badly travellers have been affected because it has been so hidden, but I suspect they've been very badly affected indeed, and particularly, of course, as always, older and disabled people. But a lot of work that the community does is putting people in quite risky areas, but also things like working on people's properties, and all of that's been suspended. That has caused a great deal of trouble. And of course, as we know, it's not just a 6-week wait for universal credit, it's also having all the paperwork and proof of address. So it's really important that we remember those people, and not just in Gypsy, Roma, and Traveller History Month. We're going to move on in a minute and see what we've got to look forward to in July. But first, I'm delighted to point out that it is still Pride Month for another couple of days. But Pride Inside, which is one of the UK virtual celebrations, which is supported by Black Pride, Amnesty International, and Parapride, launches today. The programme is not the easiest one to find, but I will put up a link to the website. That goes on, I think, for almost 2 weeks. Traditionally, Prides have always run into July, but because Pride Month is June in the States, I think in the last 10 years things have been sort of crept back into June. So that's Pride Inside. We also have a film from a young person, very own EJ Surgeonator, who's created
Yay.
this as a PowerPoint for her school assembly. Robin, before I put it on,
Hello.
And the artist, producer, director, and narrator here.
would you like
Ah.
to give her a microphone?
Not got a lot of volume.
Meaning. At the bottom bit.
It's just impossible to get that out of Dad's hands, isn't it?
So tell us about your PowerPoint.
It's just a very brief overview of just basic stuff about LGBT plus stuff because I did it for school.
And am I right in thinking they played it at the assembly? Is that right?
Yeah, they did it as one of the morning assemblies.
That is so cool. Did it take you very long to do it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work then.
But I think that's really important. I think you often see things that are so superficial, don't you? Whether it's about disability, whether it's about ethnicity, faith. And so it does take time to do things
absolutely.
properly, and it's really appreciated.
And I think the important thing is that she did it because it was off her own back. She said, "I want to do an assembly on Pride," and then emailed the headmistress and said, "Can I do this?" So
That's so cool, Emily. I'm really impressed. Really impressed. Excellent.
If young people were running the country, we wouldn't have a problem. Unfortunately, that's just not.
Are we going to do this film?
So, without further ado, we will film on. I should remind everybody to mute their microphones.
LGBTQI community. What is LGBT+, and what does it stand for? LGBT+ is a community of people who have differing gender identities and sexualities to most of the population. Here is a list of some of the groups who make up the LGBT communities. Lesbians, girls with girls. Gay, men with men. Bisexual, liking both men and women. Transgender, your body and mind not combining in terms of gender. Queer or questioning, not sure if you are straight or not. Intersex, one with both male and female organs. Asexual, an umbrella term for people who feel less to no sexual attraction. Aromantic, an umbrella term for people who feel little to no romantic attraction. Pansexual, not seeing gender in a relationship. Polyamorous, being in a relationship with more than one other person. And omnisexual, having a liking towards men, women, non-binary people. What is Pride? LGBTQI community. The beginning of Pride. Gay Pride is now a celebration. 50 years ago, it started as a demonstration. The first recorded gay club was set up by Henry Gerber in 1924, but was very quickly shut down by the police. In the United States of America, right up until 1973, same-sex attraction or gayness was classed as a mental illness. It wasn't decriminalised across the whole of the USA until 2009, and in the UK it wasn't until 2016. Bromwich Village, 28th of June, 1969, the Stonewall Inn, in Christopher Street, New York. The mafia-owned bar, a known bar for gay and trans people, was raided by the police. The police raid turned into a riot when the police attempted to arrest a black trans woman, and their violence towards her sparked what have been known as the Stonewall Riots. On the following year, 28th of June, the Christopher Street Liberation Day took place. There were many people walking down the streets carrying protest signs and chanting. This has been recognised as the first gay pride or march. How have things changed? People are now much more accepting than they were. A group of people answered a survey asking if they agree that same-sex relationships are not wrong at all. Only 17% agreed when the survey started in 1983. As for now, that figure has quadrupled, with 63% of people agreeing in 2016. We still have a long way to go, but the UK has seen a massive increase in LGBT+ equality. A study also showed that hate crime has dropped by 45% since the year 2000. But for many transgender, gay, bisexual and other people of minority groups, the fear of leaving a safe space is still painfully. LGBT+ activists. There have been many rights activists, not just for the LGBT+ community. They have all done good things and helped in the shift of mindset. I am also sure there will be many more to come, but here are just a few. Funeka Solidat. Funeka Solidat is a lesbian rights activist from South Africa. She campaigns for the rights of black LGBT+ people across the world. She is the founder of Kahailshat-based lesbian advocacy group supporting LGBT+ people in her hometown. Ryan Cassater. Ryan is a transgender musician, public speaker, YouTuber, and rights activist. He has become globally recognised as an advocate for anti-bullying, equality, and related LGBT plus topics and issues for one simple reason. He says, "I don't want any youth to feel alone in their journey." Ryan's speeches have globally inspired young people to make positive change, LGBT plus or not. Peggy Rajaski. Peggy Rajaski is a film creator and the founder of the Trevor Project, an LGBT plus anti-suicide non-profit organisation. The project was founded after her award-winning film, Trevor, skyrocketed. The film covers a boy whose life is turned upside down after he realises he might be gay. The charity offers 24/7 crisis lines to LGBT plus young people, saving lives. It's because of these people that the movement is happening. This proves that anybody can make a difference and improve the lives. What is it like now? Nowadays, thanks to the activists mentioned before, and many more besides, people's minds are much more open and accepting. As a very simple example of this, 50 years ago, or perhaps even 25, this assembly would probably not have been allowed. Sadly, there are still some places where it wouldn't be accepted. There are many great improvements being made, but there is also, indeed, still a long way to go. Many schools still don't have a good education or awareness of LGBT plus information, and therefore have little to no support systems in place. This is the same as many places, and an example of this would be that most public restrooms do not have a toilet for non-binary people or people who feel uncomfortable in male or female bathrooms. Children and adults alike need to be well educated on this subject and understand and accept that it is okay to be in the LGBT plus community, just as much as it is okay not to be. Children and young adults should not be scared to come out, and shouldn't have to worry about what their parents, other adults, or fellow kids will say and think. Pride is all about being who you are, without shame or excuse. Here's a track that celebrates this.
I'm so impressed. That's so good. It's so good. You know, young people are our tomorrow, and we should never, ever forget that.
Absolutely not. So, like I said, it's still Pride in the UK for another week with Pride Inside. Thank you so much, EJ. We hope to see you making far more content very, very soon for us. I just wanted to pick up that it's also Newham Heritage Month for today and tomorrow, so we'll be putting links up to that. I actually spent yesterday recording a virtual tour for Newham Heritage Month because, as people remember, the theme is making a home in Newham, and I've been here for 35 years. So I spent quite some time. It edited down to about half an hour, but perhaps I should have started it a little bit earlier than 3:30 in the afternoon. But that was when I was having my virtual guests round. So I'm going to put the link up to that under highlights and links for anybody who wants to know more about what else is in this house behind the banner. That's actually my front window. We've got bin men as we speak, kind of banging away beneath it. The power has just flickered here, and we have a tabby about to leap on. So, joining from home with our arts program, we've got a very interesting video coming up from Stara Plurger and Hannah Facey, which is marbling technique, which is another technique that absolutely anybody can do. But usually we would be running our film club on a Monday. Well, not every Monday, in fact. So I'm getting very distracted by the tabby here.
Sorry, she's got her claws stuck in my leg. So I'm sort of like trying not to scream.
We do love having random pets. Where with the BBC, they could be doing so much better, couldn't they? So, does anybody want to kick off this discussion? The question we have been asked is, how do you storyboard? And we've already said, well, we're going to have to start this discussion now and continue it later. But storyboarding, anybody want to define it?
Can I just ask you why you asked the question? Because I think that's interesting in itself.
Oh, well, that would be to me. Well, I think that as an artist, I've kind of want to rise to the challenge of creating a film about home. But the creative in me is like, well, I don't want to just go around and film my house, because that it, as interesting as that might be, if someone's wanting to buy it, it's not what I want to say. I would want something I write or create to be about what my home is, and not what my house looks like, what my home means. And I guess,
Sorry, Robin, can I just come in there because I should have said, or maybe you should have said, that one of our join in from home challenges is make a film with the subject of home. It could be animation, comedy, documentary, drama, dance, or anything you can think of. We will be running a special program for these films at our Disability Film Festival in December, or all virtual this year, and we will be giving a special cat award for these films. So if, like Robin, you have not started making a film because you don't know how to go about it, or you don't just want it to be an estate agent film, then listen on.
yeah. So sorry about that. So yeah, it's I've written plays, I've written songs that are like plays, and I, whether it is the same process, but I've never made a film in that way. Anything I've ever kind of done filming is being of a documentary type, or as in bolting together kind of bits of poetry and little bits of films that already exist, and I just put them together. So where do you start? I don't, as simple as that is, how do you start the process of going, I want to make a film, you know, other than the idea that you want to put in it?
Why don't you start by making a film of making the film? I think, documenting the process, especially if you're coming with a blank sheet of paper, I think is extraordinarily interesting for other people. It's very helpful to know, how to go about something. I'm sorry, the little claws are still digging into my leg. I think in relation to where to start, I would brainstorm. If you've got other people involved, people doing camera, helping you to create the story or whatever, indeed, and I would involve them from the beginning, and I would actually do something with words on paper so that you've actually got an idea of where you want to go with it. I think one of the most critical things, which is so easy to forget and so easy to think it's very easy, it isn't actually easy. Films should have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you work on that principle when you're actually brainstorming the words that you're working with, that will help you, because that'll give you some sense of guidance as to where you want to go. Once you've started to do that, then storyboarding is basically, it's like cartooning. But it's got an awful lot of information in it. So you'd start, for example, with the first couple of frames, where you put in something like title and subtitles or anything else. So that would be your start. That's the start of the storyboard. Subsequent to that, what you want to do is break down the areas that you're going to be filming in, break down the shots that you want to take, break down the camera angles, and also the sort of focal length that you want. So do you want something that's close up? Do you want something that's a mid shot? Do you want something that's a long shot? And every time you switch those shots, you create a new panel, you create a new uh,
I
thing.
think it's. I mean, I think you've sort of. We've started off with storyboarding, and then we've sort of opened it out to this giant subject, which is how do you start. So I'm going to close it back down again, which I think Julie's also doing, into storyboarding. I always see storyboarding as a stage after a script,
Yeah,
if that makes sense. But of course, not every film is going to have a script,
no.
particularly if you improvise it. We had a very fun session. I don't know, some point last year, I did a storyboarding session with the Together Film Club. Julie was off for 6 months after knee surgery, and I had to sort of think about what to do. And one of the things that we had in our craft crates was like gingerbread people, but in cardboard. I don't know, anybody with parents has seen them in shops like Wilko. You can pull them out. They're very like the little rainbow men behind you,
Yeah.
but they're individuals. And we started off by saying, well, different shots have different power. And what is a different shot? So to work out, so we started off and we said, well, this is a long shot. And we put the paper man on a piece of paper and you could see his whole body. And then we drew a line in the distance, and that was the horizon, and we moved him back, and it was a kind of ultra long shot or whatever you want to call it. And then I cut his head off and said, right, this is a close up, and you should have seen people's faces. And then we had these kind of, so then we cut a few more people up to have head and shoulders shots and mid shots and so on. And then we cut the head about to have an extreme close up. And then we looked at how that had different power. And we just started sketching out some silly stories, not because that was the story we wanted to storyboard, but just because it was a way of learning how to tell the stories. If I can find the photos on my phone, I will put a couple up on the links page, if only for a laugh. I seem to remember we had a slightly dark sense of humour by the time they'd seen me wielding my scissors, so I'll just have to check whether it's really family friendly. But it's particularly if you can't draw. And I think that's one of the kind of challenges when you hear storyboarding. You think, oh, I've got to be able to draw. Well, actually, you don't. You can just do it all with stick people. But it is very much about those shots, because how you look, how you see something, where somebody is, how close they are to the camera, that gives such a different message, which of course is the sort of thing we talk about for hours and hours and hours in club sessions. But all of us are much more visually literate than we think we are. We know these things, we internalize these things from watching other people's films. But I would say script first, and that the storyboard is really there for when you're actually going to pick up a camera. And if you're going to pick up a camera and make a film in a very planned way, as opposed to responding to what's there, then what you don't want is to discover you haven't got enough footage in the editing. And the critical thing for me is to say that I need to make sure I've got every shot when it comes to edit. There is no point in realizing that I needed to cut to somebody's face in order to cut to a different piece of footage. I need that. I need to know that when I'm actually shooting, I've got a list that says, you've got to get a close up, you've got to get an extreme close up, you've got to get a shot of them from a long way away. And then that will all make sense to me again, or to somebody, if it's somebody else doing the editing in the editing process.
I would suggest start off small. Do something very, very simple, very, very small. Even if it's a little bit outside, with Robin, with you and your guitar. What's important, really, I think, in relation to storyboarding, is to be able to plan the camera angles and to plan the camera shots. As Ju was saying, I think the idea, I think it's a wonderful idea, actually, of having the little stick people, so that you can actually see what you're talking about. If you're doing a mid shot, look at it with a stick person and think, is that going to be adequate? Or would I actually like to get more of the environment in? But practice is the best.
And I think, what we can see, and of course you can't, is Emily's rainbow paper people up behind
absolutely.
you. But that's exactly the kind of thing I don't recommend cutting them up unless you're about to do an animation that's perhaps not in the spirit of Pride Month.
Yeah. What Ju's talking about is, I don't know if you remember, if you cut up people with little things stuck through them that you use for paper, so you can move their arms and legs up and down. That's I think what you're talking about.
Well, it wasn't, but that's a jolly good point.
Oh, sorry.
They're kind of they're paper fasteners. No, we were just looking at static shots, and you're right. If you want to be able to sort of make somebody move around, and particularly when you've got a camera on your phone, life is so
Mm-hmm.
easy. But what you're talking about is there's these little paper fasteners. They're brass, aren't they? They've got like a twin bit that goes into a point. I'm just saying this for younger people. And if you push them through, you can arrange the limbs. I loved the animation that we showed on Friday from
Yes.
Act Up Newham, where they'd got basically photographs that they'd cut out and moved around as puppets. But that's a sort of almost like a next step, isn't it? That you've got these limbs that can move around so that you can have one sheet of paper that's your background, you can have one sheet of paper, and then you've got your characters and you can move the characters around, photograph them in different positions, move their legs and arms around, photograph them again. That is an awful lot quicker than the old days when you had to keep redrawing stuff.
And I think as well, if you can film it, then as we expand on this subject, then perhaps we could have a bit of your footage as part of the learning to do it from home. It would be lovely to see.
I mean, I must admit, I've never made a film where every shot was the same as it was in the storyboard, because I think we were talking last week in terms of photography about happy accidents and the stuff that so there's things you get on the shoot that you just couldn't have imagined. What you don't end up with, however, is missing shots, and there is nothing worse than trying to edit something and you just can't use any of the footage because you've got that critical shot missing. And I think storyboards are also, of course, if you're looking for funding or you're just trying to explain what your idea is to somebody. We always think our ideas are incredibly clear because they're so clear to us, but I still get surprised that they're not clear to absolutely everybody else, and pictures can really, really help with that. And of course, you might not be somebody who's comfortable with words at all. You might prefer to do the entire thing as a storyboard, which is great because film is a visual medium, it's a sound medium, but it's not really about words, and it's not really about writing. So you certainly don't have to be able to write in words to be able to storyboard and to make a great film. Did you have any other thoughts? But
Could you get a word in?
I think a lot of the things that were talked about, I don't have a lot of experience in film outside of kind of some, dabbling in kind of stop motion with Lego about 10 years ago. That I mean, it wasn't kind of academy ready. But I think, everyone always talks about STEM as in science, technology, engineering, and maths. But there's been a new one that came in recently called STEAM, which just adds art or the arts into the acronym. And a lot of the stuff that was talked about in kind of storyboarding and planning, I think really rings through to what I do as a researcher in terms of, we have to plan things, especially in terms of the PhD, and Ju, you can probably jump in on this as well. You have to have a plan of what you're going to do, and this leads to that, and that leads to this. And if you don't have that establishing shot or writing or whatever, you can't do the rest of it. And I think another thing that's really important is having kind of the golden thread of a narrative. I know, Julie, you talked about kind of the start, a middle, and an end. That when you are coming up with that initial planning and idea phase, if you can have that kind of one nugget of thing that runs through your story, I think it makes, not that it makes the rest of it easier, but if you can have that kind of one fundamental thing that that you want to get from here, from there to there, how am I going to do that? You can, if you do get stuck, you can always refer back to, okay, where am I in the journey? Where do I need to get to?
Like a motif in a musical.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to put a short film on now. It's one of the ones that Stara and Hannah from ACT UP have been sending us about the artwork they've been doing at home. And one of the reasons I'm going to play it now is I think they've developed a really interesting technique, which is very, very simple. And it's, combining photographs of the activity when you can't film, because obviously you're taking part in the activity, putting a bit of music in. Well, see for yourself. This is called Produce.
I'm Stara, and I made a painting with nail varnish and
Walker.
water. It's good and beautiful.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, that was fantastic. And I thought such a kind of compelling way to tell a story in less than 2 minutes. The words were pretty much unnecessary. And the impact of the technique was quite stunning. They've been very, very clever at doing research online and finding these techniques that you genuinely can do with stuff that you've already got at home. I remember doing marbling at school a very long time ago, where you used to sprinkle powder paint on water. I have never seen it done with nail varnish, and yet the nail varnish is going to have a really permanent effect. You could use it for absolutely anything, including, it has to be said, backgrounds for animations. What did you think, guys?
I loved it. I mean, I want to go. No, I don't want to go and live there. I love where I live, but I just they seem to have this endless supply of kind of really cool things to do. And that is the inspiration in itself. Just coming up, think, what do we do today? I know, let's marble some paint in some paper and create what looks amazing. And there is so much in there, whether it's just looking at how the colors have moved, how they've kind of separated and stuck, or whichever, whether you're kind of seeing shapes in it, what images it says to you. Just I'm
Yeah,
inspired by them.
I was a bit naughty on the audio description all day on the video, actually. So, yes, just to explain, we start off by seeing Stera signing from her sofa with Hannah interpreting, and then there's a series of photos of her using, I think, a sort of repurposed Halloween bowl by the look of it, putting in water, dripping in different coloured nail varnishes, and then I think the marbling technique is pulling the paper across the top of the water so that the colours stick to it. And they were using about 4 different colours, but predominantly reds and blues. And it was just creating these very abstract, not entirely different to the design on your t shirt. It has to be said. But I just think it's a very, very, very clever technique. It's just filming straight to camera, which easily could be and probably was the camera on the computer, using your camera on your phone to take the other photographs, downloading a bit of music, and there's all sorts of free editing packages around. It does take time, but time is what we have a lot of. And I did say that I would just check the guidance, because as with so many of us, you can get confused. You think you know what's going on, and then you see a headline and you think, "Oh, it's all over! It's all over!" And
So is this the lockdown guidance?
Yes, this is the lockdown guidance that I talked about before. Indeed, we do not get liberated on the 4th of July like everybody else. We do not get liberated till the 6th of July. Our liberation then looks very, very different. We can meet up to 5 people outdoors with social distancing, but we shouldn't have people indoors at all. We can form a support bubble if we're single, which at least means, in theory, by next month, Julie should actually be allowed to go home occasionally. But shielding itself for the people on the extremely clinically vulnerable list does not stop till the 1st of August.
Bugger.
And that's where I think people have got
Sorry about that.
really confused. We've had many a conversation, and I'm sure we've got many to come, that you have to be very, it's just because you can do something doesn't mean it's sensible or safe to do something or even considerate of all of the people who must go out. But indeed, despite what all the delivery people think who are trying to get me to open up, it's actually the 1st of August. If you look at the way infection rates change, both going down, we hope, and going up, which is still a possibility, obviously 4 or 5 weeks' time is going to make a big difference. You know, things should either be much, much safer, or in the alternative, we'll at least know that it's not safe to go out after all. But no, we are not liberated on Saturday, any of us.
I just hope that someone has told the pesky coronaviruses that they're to stay in. They have to start staying in come the 1st of August.
Well, absolutely. Well, let's all just be really, really positive. In Scotland, they do think they might be COVID 19 free by September. It would be nice in England to have a similar ambition. But in the meantime, stay home with us, stay creative, and stay well. There is a lot more life to be lived. There is no point in sacrificing it for the odd dip in a river in a park, or indeed the odd rave. And they seem to have had some very odd raves around here, including one locally over the weekend. And I very much doubt that was local people, but I don't know much more than that. So on Wednesday, we have our usual poetry and spoken word. We hope, if not, to have an appearance from our writer in residence, Penny Pepper. Penny's making some films for us because she's very busy writing her book. But we will have poetry from other people. We will have our Paralympics, which we've flagged up already. We will have gaming and virtual sport with Josh. We will have Precious Newman, the assistant's dog, showing us the outside world. Did you have a chance to see Snoop Dogs on Friday, or were you at Glastonbury?
I'm so sorry. I was watching Beyonce.
It got terrible reviews, but we are still rather amused that Channel 4 are also doing a series with dogs wearing cameras. The idea is the dog wears a camera and you have to guess whose house it is. Julie's dog loves wearing a camera, but that's just because she's Julie's dog and she's been to so much film stuff. My dog wouldn't even contemplate it. So, yes, we think that on balance, they may have found it rather more difficult to make than they might have thought. But ours is fun, if only because Julie does the commentary and they keep going around the same bit of
It's
grass.
exactly the same. It was the same bit of, well, what, 3 meters square. So it's sort of like.
Yeah, I do fear that if we try to put the GoPro on one of our cats, it would be the last we ever see of the GoPro.
Well, I'm delighted to say that Merlot, Stera's dog, is training as we speak to become a new camera dog. So we're going to have 2 canine correspondents. You too could be sending us your pet footage. Don't think we wouldn't accept it, because we would. If we can remotely describe it as being arty, oh look, you've made a film, then we would love to show it, because we're very, very aware that animals are much more popular on YouTube than disabled people. And there's Josh nodding away.
I mean,
Any people, really.
I'm intrigued actually that and I love the fact that you describe your dog's clippers as your dog's clippers, and I'm waiting for the film of Precious actually cutting Jazz's hair.
She would love to. Oh, she would adore it. If she had opposable thumbs, there would be no stopping her.
I'm a bit more worried, to be honest, about the fact the cats, Julie's cats, who are living in my office, keep getting into the lifts and pressing buttons. And there's an inevitability about the fact that sooner or later they're going to hit the right one with enough pressure. And then there's just going to be no stopping them, because we keep the door closed so they don't get
Into
too
trouble.
tangled up with my rescue cats. But yes, once they're independently mobile, it just doesn't bear thinking about. So we'd love you to join us on Wednesday. We would love even more to see your films, your pictures, your poems. Let us know what you're doing. We can have you live on the show. It's a very easy process. All you've got to do is come in through the Chrome browser. You don't need anything else. We can just bring you on the show live. So if you've got a project on, let us know. And of course, we will all be looking forward to the Wild Festival on Saturday, the 11th of July. That is one thing we've said goodbye to all these months and we haven't looked at July. But we had Andy on last week to talk us through the Wild Festival programme, and Andy will be joining us very soon to give us an update. So, plenty to look forward to. In the meantime, I'm going to say goodbye from London.
And goodbye from West Midlands.
Bye bye, everybody.
Wednesday.
Bye.